So how can you identify a mature designer? Well, there's lots of things, obviously, but one big way to tell is how they treat people around them, especially people that they think of as better or worse off than them. It's called the social comparison bias. So stick around and we'll learn all about it. What's up, UX fam? Welcome to another edition of the Cognition Catalog. Every week, we'll dig into a new cognitive bias and explore how that bias can impact how our team works together and what we can do to ensure we don't get caught up in the pitfalls. Because working with people is hard, and the more insights we have into the human condition makes it just a little bit easier. To learn more about the social comparison bias, you can find more resources at cognitioncatalog.com. Click the little bell down there so you get notified when a new episode drops, so you never have to worry about falling for the social comparison bias again. And if you want to pick up some big, beautiful art prints of some select biases, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/shop. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the promo code YouTube to get 10% off your entire order. So a minute ago, I asked a question: how do you identify a mature designer? Now, notice I said mature, not experienced. There's a huge difference there, obviously, because what I'm talking about happens to even the most experienced designers. It doesn't matter how many years of experience you have, you could still be an incredibly immature designer. Now, I don't know if this will come as a surprise to you, but the designer that I am today is not the designer that I was nearly 20 years ago when I started out working as a graphic designer. Now, growing up, I had never really thought of myself as competitive. I never played team sports. There were no big sibling rivalries in my house. In high school, I didn't really care about my friends' GPAs or ACT scores. I was a terrible student. But for some reason, when I started working, a lot of that changed. You see, I am completely self-taught. I didn't go to school for design. I've never done a boot camp. Believe it or not, I had never even taken a design class when I got my first job as a graphic designer. And unfortunately, that gave me a big sense of self-importance. I thought things like, well, obviously I'm a better designer than these knuckleheads who have degrees. I work at the same place as them. Somehow, I thought I'm better than these people are. I guess you could say that it said a lot about me and whatever skills that I had back then, but it also meant that there was a lot that I didn't know. And as much self-confidence that I had on one hand, on the other hand, I knew I didn't know a whole lot. And that made me incredibly defensive when I first started out. I was hyper aware of how I might be compared to my colleagues who did have design degrees, and I was always paying very close attention to the things that they said, the things that they did, the awards that they won, the praise that they received, the titles that they had, and all those things. Now, instead of learning from my friends at work, I made a lot of excuses. I made them out to be some kind of aloof academics using big fancy words. I demonized their education, tried to make myself feel like I was somehow better for learning these things all on my own. And it was incredibly stupid. It was incredibly unhealthy. It took me a long time to realize that instead of focusing on the people around me, what I should be doing was focusing on myself. And instead of worrying about my peers and what they knew, I could have been focusing on reading more books or taking more classes or hell, just talking to them and learning from them. What I fell for early in my career was the social comparison bias. So let's talk about it. What is the social comparison bias? Well, we tend to determine our own social and personal worth based on how we stack up against other people around us. And this bias shapes our self-perception and the perception of others, and it can lead to feelings of false inadequacy or the opposite, false superiority. Now, the concept of social comparison was first introduced by a psychologist named Leon Festinger in the 1950s, and he came up with what we call the social comparison theory. Now, Festinger's work suggested that we have an inherent drive as humans to evaluate ourselves, and in an absence of objective measures, we often turn to the other people around us for comparison. Now, this drive can lead to two types of comparison, either upward or downward comparisons. Now, upward comparisons occur when we compare ourselves to someone that we perceive as better, which can either motivate us to improve or make us feel inadequate. Then there's downward comparisons. These happen when we compare ourselves to someone that we perceive as worse off or less than us. And this can boost our self-esteem, but it may also foster a sense of complacency if we feel we're far enough ahead we don't need to improve. Now, the bias that we're talking about today takes the theory, and it says that we tend to use that innate comparison that humans do, and it warps our perception of ourselves and of our peers or the people that we run into every day. So the social comparison bias can have a huge influence on team dynamics and individual performance when it comes to work. And this can create a competitive atmosphere where members resent peers that they perceive to be better than them, or it might lead us to dismiss peers that we perceive to be less competent. So this can lead to strained relationships. It can lead to reduced collaboration. We may hesitate to share ideas or ask for help if we're worried that we might appear less competent than our colleagues. And in the far extreme, it can actually lead us to actively undermine peers that we perceive as competition. We might try to make them mess up in a meeting and things like that. Now, this bias can impact how we receive and interpret feedback as well. So depending on who it is that's giving us the feedback and our perception or our standing relative to theirs, when we receive things like constructive criticism or feedback, we might either undervalue it if we perceive that person as less competent, or we might feel threatened and defensive if we see that person as more accomplished, like they're attacking us because they see themselves as better than us and we perceive them to be a threat. Now, social comparison bias can also impact team cohesion. If we're constantly comparing ourselves to our peers and our colleagues, we might form cliques within the team based on perceived skill levels or success. So maybe the design degree people stick together, or the boot camp people stick together, or the self-taught people might stick together. And ultimately, this can reduce that overall team unity and potentially lead to feelings of isolation or resentment if you're the one left out of the clique. And for me, here's the big one: the rise of professional social networks, LinkedIn. LinkedIn has intensified social comparisons, and it's impacted our perception of our own self-worth. And often these platforms, they provide unprecedented access to information about our colleagues and our peers and their professional achievements and their career trajectories and where they are in their career relative to ours. And this constant exposure and curated highlights, I think it's important to highlight that curated highlights can lead to maybe LinkedIn envy, where we constantly compare our progress to our connections. And since most of the crap that we see on LinkedIn is curated BS, it's only the happy stuff that they want us to see. And of course, it makes us feel completely inadequate. And things like the humble brag, that makes us feel even worse. When we see our connections sharing all this success and then receiving public congratulations, lots of comments and likes on a post, we feel pressure to present an equally impressive professional image, and it might stress us out. I know this happens to me all the time. Metrics, like the number of followers and engagement, eventually they become that proxy measure of professional success or influence, and it leads, no doubt, to focus on vanity metrics rather than actual, genuine professional relationship building, which, as we all know and I talk about all the time, is incredibly important. So what can you do about it? Well, here are a few key takeaways that I think you should know. First, beware of links between social comparison and feelings of inadequacy, leading to things like imposter syndrome. Constantly comparing yourself to others can contribute to those feelings of inadequacy and even sometimes depression. Social comparison bias can make you undervalue your own accomplishments and question your own self-worth. Next, use social comparison for positive motivation. Now, while it's often seen as a negative, social comparison can be a powerful motivator when we channel it correctly. So use that upward comparison as inspiration for growth and learning rather than as a source of discouragement. Next, be mindful of competitiveness on your team. Now, while a certain level of competition can be helpful, excessive competitiveness can lead to tensions, reduce collaboration, and hurt feelings. And ultimately, this can result in unhealthy work environments where individuals will prioritize their own personal success over the collective goals or the success of the entire team. Reflect on the influence that social media has on your perception of your own self-worth. Take a step back and look inward. Platforms like LinkedIn will often spotlight those success stories without showing the entire picture, and this is going to skew your perception of your own career. Now remember that your journey is unique and your progress should be measured against your own personal goals and your own values and not against some mystery external comparison, and most of this is fake and it's exaggerated to begin with. And lastly, if you're a manager, promote collaboration over competition. If you can, try to encourage a culture that values those collective goals and shared successes over personal achievement. Highlight how diverse skills and strengths can actually come together for better outcomes that benefit the entire team. All right, y'all, that's it for the Cognition Catalog for today. I hope it helped to shed a little bit of light on what the social comparison bias is and how we can avoid some of these pitfalls at home and at work. But I'm curious, have you run into any of these issues related to social comparison bias before? How'd you get through it? I'd love to hear about it. Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. To learn more about the social comparison bias, you can find more resources at cognitioncatalog.com. Sign up for the newsletter to get a new bias in your inbox every week. And make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to worry about falling for the social comparison bias again. And if you think you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate leaving a 5-star review. That would help me out so much. To learn more about the social comparison bias, you can find more resources at cognitioncatalog.com and click the little bell down there so you get notified when a new episode drops so you never have to worry about falling for the social comparison bias again. And if you want to pick up some big, beautiful art prints of some select biases, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/shop. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the promo code YouTube to get 10% off your entire order. And if you have a favorite bias that you want to see in print, let me know. I'd be happy to take requests. Until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all.